What's up, HypnoFam? We've got a fantastic smoking cessation question to explore today. This one comes from Facebook. It says, "Hey, Vinny, my most common failure point is that some of my clients struggle not knowing what to do with their hands, which can hinder their success. I often use a metaphor about the body working as a team where the hands support the heart and lungs by finding healthier habits. What are your insights or strategies for helping people in this situation?" So you've noticed here I bolded and highlighted a few key points from this question that I want to talk about because I think they're significant. And we're going to address these as we proceed. So let's go to the next page. I want to introduce you to Cortex Man. I think I first learned about this through Richard Hill. I don't remember the people that actually designed this model, but essentially it's a 3D representational model that shows you how the brain perceives the body. And when you take a look at this, for one, it's just kind of cool to explore it. You can look this up online. You can see all the different resources of the brain that are dedicated to the function of the hands. Keep in mind, the person that's been smoking has been doing this 30, 40 times a day, 60. I've had people quit smoking 100 cigarettes a day. And so they've got that repetitious movement that's built into their lifestyle. And sometimes just making your client aware of this, something about that metacognition alleviates some of the struggle they're dealing with. So this is a good strategy to know about. You can actually introduce them to this model and say, yeah, it kind of makes sense, right? Look at all the resources dedicated to your nose, your mouth, and you're continuously doing this repetition all the time. Makes sense. It might feel a little odd after you stop doing it, right? Of course, your client's saying they don't know what to do with their hands. Well, they've been doing something with them for so long. So that's a good piece of information to give them. Sometimes just helping them understand why they're experiencing something can give them some solace as they continue on that path becoming a non-smoker. So let's talk about different models of intervention here. So in a traditional model, like if we were looking at this from the standpoint of addiction, they might offer something like, hey, this is just part of the recovery process. And they might provide some type of an aid, like, hold something in your hands, something that kind of is similar to a cigarette. They might reference some type of external aid. And then you might look at a habit model. They might infer, well, that's because this is a habit. When we do our hypnotic intervention, we're going to address the part of you responsible for that habit. And that'll sort of deal with the funny feeling as these sort of changes integrate, and that part of you that was running the habit of smoking finds something else to do. And so that's a pretty cool idea. When that works, it's absolutely phenomenal. And then there's a more of a root cause model. They might infer, well, there's an underlying cause, and as we investigate that underlying cause, you'll find the root. And when we do the work, that'll sort of resolve this issue that you're experiencing. And all these are great. They have different strengths and weaknesses. That addiction model, I know folks that just got into wearing like rings on their hand. It said things like, I actually felt unbalanced. Their body felt physiologically off balance without a cigarette in their hand. So this is a very real grievance people that are trying to quit smoking have to deal with. Whereas when we look at a client-led approach, which is what I do, the client-led model, we would just explore that phenomena, but we would do it without any inference or destination in mind. I'm not inferring anything from that experience. I just want to explore it with them. And so here's the thinking behind that. Is that funny feeling in your client's hands a conscious activity or response, or more of an unconscious response? Presumably that client is not sitting there trying to make their hands feel funny consciously. If they were, we'd just say, can you just stop doing that? It's weird, right? And so because this is an unconscious response with unconscious origins, we can just sort of use it now to back into it. And I hesitate to use the word use there because I don't want an implication that you need to start doing things to it versus just exploring it. It's an opportunity for us to learn more and back into the unconscious. We often refer to this as embracing the unknown. Here's an example of what that might look like in a session. And it's very dynamic, and because it's client-led, it's a little hard for me to convey. It's not like a step-by-step formula. It's more we're approaching every session with a series of principles whereby we allow the client's unconscious mind to show us what to do, and we just kind of figure it out together. It's such a fun collaborative way to work with people. And then they have full buy-in too, because they know they're in charge of what's going on. It's a client-led journey at that point. But getting back to the example here, so we have an unconscious response. Their hands feel kind of funny. The first thing I want to do is slow way down. Right? I want them to become more aware of what's happening. And it could be the emotions they're associating with those feelings. It could be the movement itself that's troubling them. I don't know what meanings or sensations or how they're understanding this experience of their hands feeling funny. And I don't want to assume I do. Why would I? I can just let them tell me. So we're going to slow down. The client says, I don't know what to do with my hands. I said, well, what's that like? not knowing what to do with your hands. And they go, oh, it feels funny. I feel off balance. I just feel fidgety, I feel anxious. Okay, now we've got something to work with here. What are the chances that client's going to be smoke free 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, the rest of their life, if they're struggling with these anxious feelings? So instead of trying to get them to do anything at that moment, what I want to have them do is go, okay, so you're feeling kind of anxious, you're feeling off balance. What happens when you just sort of sit with all that and experience it fully without judgment and just giving people the space to do that? It's amazing how powerful their mind is. And if you think about this, it reminds me of that old Erickson point he made about how problems exist when the conscious and unconscious mind are out of alignment. Well, what are we doing here? We're giving the unconscious and conscious some time to work together here. And there's no inference or presumption on my part. Maybe what's best for that client is to continue to have this funny feeling, and somehow that creates a bit of an aversion they need in the short term to be smoke free long term. I would have no way of knowing. I don't know what that person needs to experience to become a non-smoker, but they do, right? At some level of awareness, and we can figure it out together, which makes this work a lot more fun because I don't have to guess. I can just be present with them and allow their experience to guide us. Experience becomes the gateway into trance. Trance becomes the gateway to learning. And in this case, we're learning how that client is going to become a non-smoker. And so when I've done this with people, I've seen them have amazing insights. Sometimes this will back into like a spontaneous age regression, and they'll start to recall things from an earlier time in their life. But because they're doing it, they're starting to understand how powerful their mind is. They get all these wild insights. Sometimes different intuitive images might flash into their mind. Why did I remember that? And then we'll focus on the thing that came up in their mind, and it tells an amazing story, things that they've associated to smoking they weren't previously aware of. But the big thing here is if you're going to do this, we can't approach whatever comes up for them with judgment. And we also don't want to be scared that we don't know how to handle what comes up, because the unconscious mind is going to deal with these kind of funky, odd metaphors and symbols a lot of times. And you would have no way of consciously knowing how to handle those things when they first show up. But once again, if you just see it as an opportunity to learn more, they naturally figure out what to do. And another thing we talk about with these client-led smoking cessation approaches is we can kind of let the candle flicker out on the experience. What we're doing here is we're giving a client an opportunity to study problems they previously were unconscious of. Meaning there's this intense problem because there's an apprehension to even deal with it, acknowledge it, or explore it. They just want it to go away. I'm sure you've experienced this too as a human being. We all have, where we have a problem, but we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to become aware of it because it's very uncomfortable. But as we move closer to it, a lot of the times, the elements of the problem we were predicting were going to be harmful or uncomfortable, as we familiarize ourselves with it, that discomfort kind of goes away because now we understand it differently. Hopefully that makes sense. Literally just exploring the thing that shows up in a session can mitigate all the different associations and the discomfort, what they're dealing with. And think about what's happening here is that person has these wild epiphanies and they're starting to become more aware of things that are happening internally. Of course, they're going to drift into a trance state. And this can lead to eye closure and all kinds of really cool phenomena. The mind has all these really cool things it can do to produce solutions because it's incredibly flexible and powerful in that way. I never want to assume as a practitioner, I know the one my client needs. Their mind can do it, and it knows that person better than I do. And so let's go to the next page here. So two final things to point out here, right? It's nice to remember people can quit smoking regardless of their hands feel. And if you're working in a client-led way, you didn't fail, because ultimately this came from them and it's their job, their responsibility to quit smoking. If we're thinking from the standpoint, we want to maximally empower that client, there's no way I could fail for them because I can't quit smoking for them. They have to do it. So that's the beauty of this approach. It's on that client, and we're helping them find ways to empower themselves to make different choices. It reminds me of that old Erickson metaphor about I didn't have the right to throw that person in the water. I'll just link to the YouTube clip below so you can see it there. To summarize, we've got a series of different approaches, right? The addiction model, they might say that's just part of the recovery process, point to some type of recovery schedule or calendar that's online. You can expect this symptom to alleviate over this amount of time. And then there's more of a habit model that might say, okay, well, we're going to use that part and help it find different jobs. And again, when that works, it's just amazing. There's that root cause model we talked about before, whereby we're just going to sort of try to investigate what's going on underneath the surface. But then there's the client-led journey where we're not as concerned with any of those specific outcomes or destinations. We're just creating the space that client's mind needs to learn about what's really going on and to figure out how to walk away from smoking forever. As complex and as dynamic as that may sound, it's actually very simple because we're just using that client's experience as the gateway into trance, and that trance now becomes the gateway for them to learn. And so we don't have to go into the session with a plan because we couldn't plan a thing like that, right? Ultimately, person doesn't know why they're stuck. I don't know why they're stuck smoking. Person doesn't know how they're going to quit smoking. I don't know how they're going to quit smoking, but ultimately they have to do it. So I want to create the right context for them to be able to. And to do that, there's no better source than them, right? So that's the idea of the client-led journey. It's such a fun, dynamic way to work. You want to see a demo or something, shoot me a note. And then also just the metacognition, just seeing how the mind works often gives them a new level of awareness. All right, folks, like, subscribe, blow this video up, comment, share it with people, and send me all your smoking cessation questions. All right, take care.